tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan Agajanian Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Our guests waiting to be profiled are performer, writer Marissa Chibas and director, choreographer Dan Mojica. Actress, writer Marissa Chibas was born and raised in Manhattan. She went to Lincoln Square Academy, Great Neck High School, and SUNY Purchase. You've seen Marissa Chibas on TV in Law and Order and Feds, on film in The Speed of the Tortoise and Getting Away and Murder in Henry Fool. What else? But when it comes to the stage, you've seen her from Broadway, Abe Lincoln in Illinois and Brighton Beach Memoirs, to the Mark Taper's theaters, Floating Island plays, and the House of Bernardo Alba. So count all those theaters in between, and you've seen her all across America. Marissa, was show business in your family?
Actually, I do have a cousin, Kay Cole, who is an actress, choreographer, director. But she and I are the only ones in the family who are in the theater.
But was she any kind of influence on you?
Oh yeah.
Oh, she was?
Oh, absolutely.
Ah.
She was an influence on me, yeah.
I was trying to count in your mother, who was the Miss Cuba beauty queen. Doesn't that count?
That definitely does count, because she was always posing and getting me into fashion shows. And so as a young child, I was in front of the public in that way.
We talked a lot about all the plays you've done, and I think you've worked a lot with Latino writers.
Yes.
You've worked with, I guess, Edward Machado and Nilo Cruz. Have you done their plays?
I have. I did the premiere of Nilo Cruz's Two Sisters and a Piano at the MacArthur Theater. And I did the Floating Island plays, which were all four of Eduardo Machado's plays encompassed in the Floating Island plays at the Mark Taper Forum. And to me, I mean, especially the past 10 years of my life, I've been devoting a lot of my energy to Latino playwrights and supporting that work and getting those voices out onto the American.
I was going to ask you, because as opposed to American writers, do you see a difference in the way you approach something? I mean, you wouldn't necessarily be Latina. On the stage, you could play anything.
And I have. I've played everything. I've played German, I've played Jewish, I've played Italian, I've played everything.
Yeah, so is it a difference in the way you approach things?
No, but there is just something for me just in terms of philosophically, and that I really want to support these writers, and I want their voices to be heard, I want their work to be heard. And I would love to see the work being presented more often in American theaters.
But you're a writer as well.
Yes.
So do you write for other people, or do you just write for yourself?
At this point, just myself.
You're just writing?
This is my premiere in many ways as a writer and as a playwright, certainly, with my play Daughter of a Cuban Revolutionary.
That's your first one you've written?
Yes.
Ah, and then did you choose everyone to be a part of it? Did you choose the lighting and the set designer? And
well, I have my creative home is the Center for New Performance at CalArts, and it is this incredible creative community at CalArts where I'm a faculty member. I'm head of the acting program there.
Yeah, I want to ask you about what you do there, but did you develop it with them?
Yes, and they and Eduardo Machado, who's now artistic director of INTAR, are the reason I have been able to do this work. And I will do it, I'm presenting it here this week at Red Cat, and then I will do it in New York. In May, I have a 5-week run in New York.
That's pretty long, because this was like 5 days at Red Cat, wasn't it, or 4 or 5 days?
It ends up being just about a full week.
A week.
But there I'll have a nice long run.
And then do you take the same set with you?
I will. It's a brilliant set. I have a great director, Mira Kingsley. It's all part of the CalArts community the creative team is all from CalArts and was pulled together by our producers. And I mean, it's really an extraordinary environment. I'm thrilled and very grateful.
When you're head of that department,
yes.
What are your duties at CalArts?
I oversee the undergrad and graduate programs, acting programs. So I have over 120 students that I oversee.
They all want to be actors?
And they all want to be actors, and no two actors want exactly the same thing. There are a lot of different roads in terms of being an actor and how to pursue that field. And one of the things that we really support is the actors creating their own work. So we try and create as many possibilities for actors to be able to develop their own work and have their own voices.
Do you teach actually? Do you teach acting?
I do.
Oh, you do. So it's a program where you teach acting. The other creative team came on. I don't know, did you choose them, or did they come because you know them, or?
They came, my director basically chose them and pulled them together.
I see.
And they were people that she had worked with before, for the most part, and felt very strongly about, and I totally trusted her.
Because Daughter of a Cuban Revolutionary takes place on the sand. Mm-hmm. You have a raked set. It's a black box, right?
Yes.
And stadium seating, and you have a raked stage filled with sand, which is pretty, bizarre when you look at it and you think, is she going to be walking through that? And you use that sand so much.
Yes. I mean, the set designer gave me an extraordinary playing area. And it's my own little island.
I know.
So I can really play on my own little island. And then, of course, the sound effects really are the other characters for me, the sound effects, the video.
There's a big screen. It's a long, narrow screen.
Yeah.
And it looks like the sand is coming up into the screen so much of the time. You use it in so many different ways.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very effective, and we have stock footage because this is a story about my family. A central figure is my uncle, who was a Cuban politician.
I wanted you to tell us the story of the daughter of a Cuban revolutionary. That was your father, right?
My father. He co-wrote the manifesto, the 1957 manifesto of the revolution with Felipe Pasos and Fidel Castro and my father, Raul.
And then what happened?
Well, he was...
What really happened? Because I don't think Cuba is the way they must have envisioned it.
No.
Now?
No, and the manifesto is a very interesting document because it talks about democratic principles,
right.
Free elections, all kinds of things that do not take place on the island of Cuba.
But what they were most involved in, your father and the people who wrote it, right?
Yes, and many of the people who fought in the revolution were not seeking another dictatorship. The point was to end dictatorship. Of course, there was a desire to have social programs. There was great disparity between the rich and the poor. There was terrible problems in that area. So they were trying to rectify that. So there was a social democratic agenda, there's no question.
How disappointed did they feel? Did they feel disappointed?
Oh, my father, it was the tragedy of his life.
I would think, because it seemed to me, even when you were explaining things and talking on stage, I was feeling like very melancholy, and they had such high ideals, and they wanted so much, and they were in great positions, weren't they?
Yes.
In the hierarchy or in the government?
And it became very clear early on in the revolution. After the revolution, Fidel Castro started to give key positions to communist factions of the revolution, of the coalition of fighters that won the revolution.
Were there two different groups? Is that what it was?
There were several different groups.
There were several.
Several different. The revolution couldn't have been won without unifying the groups. But then it was made into the extreme. It went to the extreme of the leftists. And I'm sure things like the Bay of Pigs pushed things more to the left.
So. Then how did your family leave? Because you were born in New York.
My father had a meeting with Castro where he spoke his mind, and he left that meeting and realized, I'm going to end up in prison like so many of my friends.
Your father spoke his...
Yes. And he said, I better get out of here.
He knew that right away?
Right away. He thought, uh-oh. But he had to have that meeting, and he had to say what he thought. And so he left in the middle of the night in a 17-foot catamaran with my mother.
Is that right?
Crossed the Florida Keys
At
and
that
made it
time
to Miami.
At that time, they weren't stopping them, were they? Or were they?
No, this was pretty early on.
Yeah, so
and
they
he
could
was,
get away.
At that time, he was in the highest level commander to have left the island.
So they wouldn't question him?
Revolution.
You think they wouldn't question him?
I'm sure he
Or he
was
could have-
questioned, but he was accepted.
And then when he came to America, he taught school.
He did.
And his brother must have been so disillusioned. That's how I felt when I came away.
Eddie, who was a famous politician, he had a radio program, and the legend has it that you could walk down any street in Havana at 8 p.m. and hear his voice, or any street in Cuba.
In Cuba, yeah.
And hear his voice, because everyone was listening, and he would denounce corrupt government officials. And
but that was a different regime. Castro hadn't come yet, right?
And that was during Cuba's democratic period. There was 11 years of democracy, and that was it.
Oh, so he would. So he was talking against the political thieves.
Exactly, the corruption, and he was running for president. He was front runner for the 1952 presidency.
Oh, he was.
And he committed suicide during a live radio broadcast.
That was a true.
Shortly before the election.
Because you addressed that, and that's when I became like, how disillusioned must he have been? Because he was part of the revolution with your father, right?
Yes, except of course this was 51. This was before Castro. Castro was ran under my uncle's ticket as a congressman of Havana. He was a very young man.
Oh, I see.
And in many ways, my uncle was a sort of mentor for him.
Oh, I see. So we were talking in the 50s.
Exactly. And then once...
With Eddie.
And once Eddie commits suicide, there's this political vacuum. Batista imposes a military coup. And then there is the fight against Batista, which is what coalesces people like my father and Castro and others to fight the revolution.
Will this go any further than a one-person play?
That's a very good question. There is some interest in the project, and possibly a documentary or even film.
Because
I'll be looking into that.
You must have all your own material from your family, right?
Yes.
And how was your father when he was here in America? Was he happy to be in America?
He was, but he was somebody who was not an extremist. So for example, he was opposed to the Bay of Pigs invasion, and it was difficult for him. He was somebody who was between worlds.
I see.
But I mean, one of the things that I celebrate is that I think he had a very good life, ultimately. And he was he was writing on Cuba and his hopes for Cuba. He never gave up hope until the very end.
So you have all of his writings?
I do. I
yeah,
have his
that's
writings.
great.
I have something from 1932 that I've taken excerpts from, and I've done in the play. So.
Well, we're going to look for it in New York. We're going to keep looking for it, Marissa. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And thanks for watching this part of the Joan Quinn Profiles. We'll be right back with Dan Mojica. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome back to the Joan Quinn Profiles. I'm here with director, choreographer Dan Mojica, who was born in Puerto Rico and raised in Miami, where he attended the University of Miami. Did you plan to be an entertainer when you were in Miami?
Absolutely. I started up very young.
Oh, you did?
You know, I was, since I was in my early grade schools, I was always involved with music. I was involved in the drama programs. So, you know, my sister was the person that sort of got me involved in the theater.
Was she in it?
She was involved in the theater, and, I actually would trail along to some of her rehearsals and stuff, and got very excited and very interested in doing theater. Didn't know which direction I was going to go. I mean, I started out as a performer, obviously, as an actor, and eventually that sort of led me to the creative side, which I was very excited. I always loved the rehearsals more than the performances.
Did you?
Yeah.
Were you taking dance classes, acting classes?
All of it, all of the above.
Did your sister excel in her career, or are you the one who took over?
I'm the one that took over.
You took over.
She stayed in the business, I think, through her early 20s, and then decided to move on to a different career.
Oh, she.
And I sort of kept the torch and kept running with it. So.
But that was a great influence for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. My family, my sister, my parents were always very supportive of me in the arts. Funny thing, as the dance side of me, my father is the one that used to take me to dance class.
Is that right?
So
he wasn't a dancer, though.
He wasn't a dancer at all. But in this day and age where you think a male being involved in dance, especially very young. My dad was the one who was the most supportive.
And you go to soccer, right?
Yeah, exactly. Instead, he would pick me up at dance class. So
did you, when you were taking dance class, were you thinking I can do this kind of choreography, or I can put these steps together?
Well, I always loved the movie musicals.
Oh.
So I was very.
So it was more in that vein than
yeah,
a ballet.
I was jazzed by
jazz.
the Fred Astaire and the Gene Kelly and that vein. So the musical genre is really what inspired me, and what sort of led me into musical theater.
So was there a lot going on in Miami, or did you have to leave Miami to get noticed?
Eventually had to leave Miami. I mean, the arts in Miami were great. I mean, but very young in the 70s and the 80s, but there was a lot of opportunities there. And I was very fortunate to go to a high school that had a performing arts group there, and then into the college as I went to the University of Miami, and they had a great musical theater program. So, and then that took me to actually out into the real world to work, and I ended up moving to New York, and I lived there for 10, 12 years.
And you were working all the time in the theater?
Absolutely. That was my love, my passion.
Did you want to be a choreographer, or did you want to direct? Because you do both.
I do both. I've always wanted to do both. I feel when I have the opportunity to do both, I mean, sometimes I just direct or sometimes I just choreograph, but when I can do both, it's like one vision coming from both angles.
I always think of a director as having to move people around the stage, and I always think of it as being choreography in a way.
It is. It's very much so choreography. I mean,
even though
I think
it's not a dance step.
Some of your best directors are people that know how to move the masses, how to make pretty pictures, how to make great design,
right?
On the stage.
You're a member of the Society of Directors and Choreographers. What does it take to become a member of that? I didn't even know that they were joined together, directors.
Well, it's my professional union. It's a union that represents me and my work and my my licensing rights to my work.
Do you have to have work so many plays, or
I think you have to be involved in a production that is generally a commercial production will take on the union, as opposed to a non-union avenue.
I see. Talk about Broadway, because when Beauty and the Beast went to Broadway, you did, 8 seasons of all different kinds of things?
Right. I was very fortunate to be involved with the first production that Disney Theatrical, the Walt Disney Company, put onto the stage on Broadway, and that was the production of Beauty and the Beast. And
that's when they just started to go into.
It was the very first production that they decided to take their animated feature and make it into a live stage production.
I didn't realize that was the first.
It was the very first.
That was a big jump for them, right?
It was a huge jump. It was a huge unknown at the time for a major corporation, which is now it's changed all of what Broadway is about now. But it was an exciting venture to sort of be involved in from the ground up. I always had Disney connections and relations, so to get involved in that production and their first production into Broadway was an exciting thing for me. To develop the show. We developed the show, and it tried out in Texas, and eventually made its way to New York.
So you were with them all the way along. The other thing that I found so incredible was that there were 16 companies around the world.
Absolutely.
I mean, and you were involved in making sure those were running. I can't believe
it was unfathomable at the time. We couldn't believe
London,
that we were
Tokyo, Buenos Aires,
Germany. there were 3 national tours in the U.S. alone.
That alone, 3
you know.
tours. Where were they going? Like one on the coast, one in the mid.
One of them sat down for a little while. One was in Boston for a while. I mean, it would just
move around. Would
different
you
places.
have to go and make sure that everything was okay?
Part of my role in that show was also to supervise all the companies as well. So I would live on an airplane and in a hotel most of the time, and jump from company to company and keep it in shape and make sure that continuous casting was a revolving door for all these companies. And periodically we would mount a new company, and then we would mount a new company, and then I would spend 3 months in Madrid, or 3 months in Stuttgart, or 3 months in London, and by the way, doing the shows in that language.
Oh, that's right. So
know.
you would direct, or you would say what was going on in English,
Absolutely.
and then it'd have to be.
We'd have an interpreter. I'd have an interpreter with me, who was always my right-hand person.
You also act.
That's
you
correct.
acted in Camelot?
No.
What was it?
Camelot just opened this last week, which is playing at the La Mirada Performing Arts.
Oh, this is part of the reprise, is it?
Well, Reprise is a series here in Los Angeles.
Tell us about that a little bit.
That produces musicals, 3 seasons, 3 shows a year, and I've done numerous shows for them.
What does that mean, reprise? They bring them their old plays, or
they try to bring the best of Broadway back to the stage. Sometimes old productions, sometimes newer productions, but generally things that haven't necessarily been seen in a long time, or particularly out on this coast.
Oh, right.
And it's a company that tries to revive and take Broadway talent and Los Angeles talent, mix it, and put together another production that hasn't been seen in a while.
So that's what you've been. Well, did you act in Camelot?
No.
You never did.
No. I've
What were you acting in? How did I get that confused?
No. I mean, I've choreographed production of Camelot. We just launched the national tour of Camelot with Michael York, which is now going out on the road starting next week, actually.
Yes, that's right.
So that's
Michael York. You had a wonderful cast.
We had Michael York, Rachel York, Jim Barber, a glorious cast, and that's actually, look for that across the United States.
Yes.
It's coming to a city near you.
I see. I see.
But no, my acting career was in my younger days, and did many musicals as I was on the road with 2 shows with Me and My Girl and Singing in the Rain. And that was sort of my acting background, to do big productions, big musicals.
What you also worked on a film, Elvis Has Left the Building? Is that right now?
That is
right?
correct. That is very correct.
What was that?
It was a movie with Corbin and you're gonna stop me on the
Did
theme
you
film
do
artist.
all the choreography?
I did. It was an interesting piece. It's on video, if you
it is. It's on
or DVD, should I say? And it was sort of a funny comedic take on interpreters of Elvis Presley in this sort of quasi-mysterious thriller,
So, Anything Goes, another thing you worked on.
Correct, which has been very successful, and show actually I've done a few productions of.
And you've worked with David Galligan a lot, who's a terrific director.
Yes.
And in that respect, I think the 2 of you do these charity events.
We try to do a lot of
great.
benefits. We do the stage benefits and the Actors Funds benefit. I also do the AIDS event in San Francisco and one in Atlanta as well with David.
David does a lot of that, doesn't he?
Absolutely. And he's a great collaborator with me, and we take a celebrity or a star and we create numbers for them, and all for the good of the charity.
I was going to ask, how do you get those celebrities and those stars? Because you usually have such a lineup.
We do. I mean, most of the people are giving because they want to give back and support the charity. There's one coming up in March, which I'm actually working on, which is this year, I believe it's, they're all based on composers, and this year it's Stephen Sondheim.
I see. So then you'll take that material and use it and couple it with someone who's going on.
Correct.
You're working on something right now. I want to make sure we mention it.
Sure.
It's in the Valley.
That's correct. I'm working on a new production, a brand new production called They're Playing Our Song. It's a musical.
It's an old
Broadway musical. It actually was on Broadway in 1979 with Lucy Arnaz and Robert Klein.
Oh, right.
It was actually a Tony-nominated musical. It also won a Tony Award for Lucy Arnaz.
So what do you do?
And-
Did you know Lucy? Did you see it at the time?
I never saw the production on Broadway. I've seen productions of it regionally.
So how do you decide what to do?
Well, Valley Musical Theater is a new organization here in the Valley, which their season is at the El Portal Theater. And
That's a great stage. They do a lot of good things
space.
there, don't they?
Absolutely. And it's new and up and coming. And in the NoHo Arts District, the arts are alive there. And the El Portal is now bringing theater, and Ron Goswick, the producer of Valley Musical Theater, is now mounting a series of shows throughout the year. This season, I believe, is They're Playing Our Song is the opener for this season, and it continues on with Little Shop of Horrors and Baby, and they're actually bringing back Beehive from last season because it was so successful.
Oh, so they have a really nice program.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of things that happen at the El Portal as well. There are a lot of.
And is it easy to find and easy to park and all that?
Oh, absolutely. It's right off. On Lancashire, right off of, I think it's south of Magnolia, I believe.
So it's like
it's very
local.
Convenient, and that area is just booming with residences now and little coffee houses and things like that. So
very,
it's
very community.
Absolutely, absolutely.
One thing before we leave, and I know what a choreographer, do you have a mark that says, "This is Dan Mojica"? Do you do some kind of funny thing?
Well, I think some of my influence in my life were people like Bob Fosse and Michael Bennett and Jerome Robbins. And, I always feel like Astaire was a big influence on me, that sort of, that elegance and that flavor of bringing to musical theater and storyline as well. I'm very much, I think, the storyline director, choreographer. I'm able to blend both worlds and tell a great story either through dance or through acting or through music. And it's really what I love to do. And, working on They're Playing Our Song is an exciting thing because it's a Neil Simon play. So it's really a blending of a great play and some great music, great songs, and it opens on. I'm going to get this in. Opens on March 20th. The preview is March 23rd. Opens March 24th.
Good.
Yeah, Portal.
Good. And we'll see. I'm going to come and see it.
You're welcome. My guest opening night.
Thank you very much, Dan, and thank you for watching the Joan Quinn Profiles today. Keep writing to 777 South Figueroa, 44th floor, Los Angeles 90017. We'll see you next time on the Joan Quinn Profiles.